Good Vach, everybody, and thank you so much for joining our webinar. Telling stories of a tzaddik on Motzei Shabbos, as I say every week, it brings many, many blessings. Now, for the last many weeks, Rabbi Carlebach has shared the most amazing stories of the Rebbe with us, and I want to thank you, Alex. This week, he's being joined by Rabbi Mendel Popek, director of Chabad in Cape Town. Rabbi Popek and his Rebbetzin were sent by the Rebbe to Cape Town in 1976, and him and his Rebbetzin have built up the most amazing operation in Cape Town. Rabbi Popek's parents were sent by the Rebbe to Philadelphia in 1953 under the most challenging conditions. Rabbi Popek is going to share some of his childhood memories, one or two personal stories, and that will be followed by amazing stories by Rabbi Carlebach. So over to you, Rabbi Popek, and thank you for doing this.
Thank you very much, Reb David. A good Tevach, Shavua Tov to you all. I'd like to dedicate the few words that I have to say to the yahrzeit, which is tonight, of my nephew who passed away 4 years ago, Rav Ram Yeshaya ben Rav Shalom Doivber, Olav Shalom. So first, let me mention something that the Rebbe told me about South Africa. Before, in about 1985, when I traveled to New York for one of the Rebbe's Farbrengens, I mentioned that I wrote to the Rebbe at the time that people in my community asked me for a bracha and for instructions and for how they should deal with this situation in South Africa. And the Rebbe wrote me 2 lines as an answer to that. He said, Avodas Hashem besimcha, that the service of Hashem should be with joy, ubebitochen amiti boy, and with complete faith in Him. If there's ever a time that we need to serve Hashem with joy, and that we need to have faith in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, true faith in Him, and whatever that means to each and every one of us, that we search within ourselves for thinking positively and acting positively, because we know that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that Hashem is with us. Now is the time, and especially in the days before Rosh Hashanah, to take out on that type of resolutions, that we are going to be serve Hashem with simcha and with true faith. Rabbi Mishint asked me to speak about how my father, who was in Worcester, Massachusetts at the time, he was a sheikhet and a teacher in Worcester, and being there for a number of years. My sister actually was born there, and one day my father gets a telephone call from Rabbi Chadakov. Rabbi Chadakov was the Rebbe's personal secretary. Rabbi Chadakov asks him, how are things going in Worcester? What is the situation with your job, with the Yiddishkeit? Obviously, he was wanting to get feedback. What's happening there in Worcester, and after the conversation, at the end of the conversation, Rabbi Chadakov says, "And do you want to leave Worcester?" So he says, "No, the Rebbe sent me to Worcester. I'll stay in Worcester." And he hung up. Well, a few moments later, he thought to himself, Rabbi Chadakov doesn't ask anything that the Rebbe didn't indicate to him. Why would he, be calling me and asking me this question? So he picked up the phone and called Rabbi Chadakov back and said to him, if the Rebbe wants me to move, I'm ready to move. So he says, it's good that you called. I would suggest that you come to New York, and the Rebbe wants to see you. So he comes to New York, and the Rebbe tells him that I'd like you to go to Philadelphia, and I'd like you to take over the school over there in Philadelphia and to run the school. There was a Beth Jacob school, a Beth Yaakov school there, and he wanted him to run the Beth Yaakov school. And he gave him some other instructions of how to deal with the school, and he should hire a principal, etc., and he should become the director of the school. And before he left the Rebbe's office, he said to him, and when you will get there, you'll tell the balabatim of the school, the officers of the school, that the other person that I had, I don't have anymore. Okay, that was like Chinese to him. He didn't understand what that meant, but he noted it and went to Philadelphia. When he went to Philadelphia, he wanted to know how this came about. So he was told by the Balabatim that there were Merkez Shluchim that came even in those years, and they came and they visited the schools or the people for the people who run the school, and they were saying that the school is it's very difficult. They wanted to close up the school. There is so much, so many problems. So they suggested go and see the Rebbe. So they went to see the Rebbe, and the Rebbe suggested to them that they take another person. And they said, well, where are we going to find somebody? Where are we going to find an educator? Where are we going to find somebody who can run it for us? The Rebbe said, don't worry, I'll help you. And here's the punchline. He said to them, do you want somebody with a beard or somebody without a beard? And what they said at that time was, we don't care, whatever the Rebbe says. And to this, the Rebbe responded when he sent my father, he says, tell them that the other person that I had, I don't have anymore. And that was when he became the director of the school, and he built up the school to 400 children. Fortunately, he passed away in 1977. He was there for 25 years, and was a shlichus that he that he did whatever he could for Yiddishkeit in Philadelphia at the time. And after he came a few years later, he wrote to the Rebbe that Philadelphia is a big city and they need more shluchim. So that was when Rabbi Shem Tov, Rabbi Vremel Shem Tov was sent then to Philadelphia to take over to run the Chabad Center. So that's in a nutshell the story of how my father got to from Worcester to Philadelphia. Just want to share a story that we myself and my wife were sent. I got a telephone call, a message from Rabbi Chadakov as well to come into his office with a chaver of mine, Chaimer Lieberman. So that was in 1974, summer. And Rabbi Chadakov said to us, would you like to go to Panama for 6 weeks? So we said, sure. He said, how can you say sure if you didn't ask your wives? Tomorrow, if you can please bring your wives here so that I'll hear from them that they are prepared or not prepared to go for 6 weeks to Panama. If anybody has been to Rabbi Chadikov's office, the office was about 4 foot or 6 foot by 3 foot. You can hardly fit. They had 2 chairs in it, and that's what you can fit. So when the wives came, they sat down, and he told us to stand behind them. So, and we were up against the wall, and he was up against the wall. It was like a little closet. The interesting thing is that he held his finger on the buzzer all the time. You always used to see him holding his finger on the buzzer. Anyway, so he asked if we would prepare to go to Panama. The woman said yes. I said to them, he wants them to go and visit people, and it was the first time that there was going to be like a America Shlichus for young couples, and also to take along with us 6 bochrim. So it was 2 couples and 6 bochrim to go to Panama. So fine. We went to Panama, and in Panama there was a Sfardische Kehillah and an Ashkenazische Kehillah. The rabbi was called Chacham Tzion Levi. Chacham Tzion Levi was a giant of a man, but he was also a very, very powerful person in the community. And normally people who went there, America Shlichus, were very, he wasn't very friendly to them. And we went in, we spoke to him, and he's very forceful, and he says to me, "Who are you? What's your name?" So I said, "Menzel Popek." "Popek from where?" So I says, "From Philadelphia." And all of a sudden his tone changed, and he says, "What do you need? What do you want? You can ask me for what you need here in the community, and I'll help you." I was very surprised because I didn't know what the change was all about. Nevertheless, we started working, we started doing, and we worked for 6 weeks. And in the middle, Rabbi Chadakov called, and he asked, "Well, how are the Noshim Tzidkoniyos doing? How are the righteous women doing?" He wanted to know what was happening and how they're faring. Again, I know that if these things don't necessarily come from Rabbi Chadakov, but they come from higher sources. We worked for 6 weeks, and there were 3,000 people in Panama at the time, and Jewish people, 3,000 Jewish people in Panama. We got together 750 people, and we made a concert with Eli Lipsker at the end of our shlichus there, and we created a tremendous impact from that. I went back and reported it all back to the Rebbe. Later on, I found out that my father, Olav Shalom, hosted Rabbi Sion Levi when he came to Philadelphia, and he brought his ailing son with him, and they needed treatment. And my father took care of him from a hospital point of view, from a place to stay point of view, from a food point of view. So all of a sudden, the demeanor changed. And certainly the Rebbe knew about this. So certainly this had something to do with perhaps why we were sent, to go there. But the story didn't end there. Erev Purim, I got a call again with Chaim Meir Lieberman that we should go once again to Panama for Purim, and not to forget to take matzahs with us to go to the Panama Canal zone to the sailors and the American soldiers that are there and distribute matzah in the Panama Canal at the time to all the Jewish people. And certainly we found a tremendous number of Jewish people that we gave a matzah to. And finally, let me give you one more short story. That's a short story from Rabbi Whiteman, from my nephew's father from Brazil. He once brought a wealthy man to the Rebbe. There were a lot of wealthy men in Brazil. And he brought him to the Rebbe. The man wrote the Rebbe a note and wrote out a check to the Rebbe for the Rebbe's institutions. And then he went back to Brazil. And a couple of weeks later, Rabbi Whiteman gets a call. He says it doesn't seem like the check was deposited. So Rabbi Whiteman called the Americas and asked the secretariat, do they have the check? Did it get lost? So the secretariat said the check is on the Rebbe's desk, but he didn't authorize us to deposit it yet. And about a month or a month and a half later, he received a receipt that it was deposited. A few months after that, Rabbi Whiteman was going to New York, so this gentleman sent another letter and another check to the Rebbe, and he quipped, it would take a couple months for him to deposit this one as well. Anyway, he went to New York, gave it in to the Rebbe, and lo and behold, on that same day, at 2:00 in the afternoon, the Rebbe authorized to deposit the check. The next day, Rabbi Whiteman called this gentleman, and he said to him, I gave it in, and he saw that he was very uncomfortable. Something was very wrong. He wasn't feeling well. He said, "What's the matter? What happened?" He says, "Last night, my father in Belgium had a car accident. He was an elderly man, but thank God, he's not hurt. He had X-rays. Nothing's broken. Just a few bruises and a few cuts, but he's fine." Rabbi Whiteman says, "When was it? What time?" He says it was 8:00 at night. So he says that was 2:00 in the afternoon in New York. That was just the time that the Rebbe authorized to bank the check. He says more than the wealthy person does for the poor man does for the wealthy person. Shuas Hashem ke'erefayin. Tzedakah tatzil mimavet. Tzedakah helps out, and this week's parsha is all about tzedakah. So it's another story that we heard and we saw from the Rebbe, that the Rebbe deals with things on a super rational level. Thank you, gentlemen. Now I pass it on to Rabbi Alex Karlbach. Yesher Koach. Rabbi Alex, there we go. Unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Thank you, Rabbi Popek, for the beautiful personal stories. I go back with Rabbi Popek, actually, to 1970-71 when I came to New York to Ocean Parkway. He was my dormitory supervisor and our regent's supervisor, if you remember that, Rabbi Popek. Once again, a good vach to all our listeners. A great thank you to Rabbi David Masinta for this amazing initiative of spending Mitzvah Shabbos, sharing stories and inspirations of our great Rebbe of Tzaddikim. And these stories, I hope, are more than stories. They should be used as a means of inspiration. And what I'd like to focus on tonight are stories about one of the Rebbe's great miftzoim. It was really revolutionary at the time that it came out. Everybody knows that the Rebbe has made 10 mitzvah campaigns, and we spoke about it in the past. But one of the great ones started in the month of Elul. We have now blessed the month of Elul. Rosh Chodesh is going to be Wednesday and Thursday. We're going to start blowing the shofar from Thursday, actually, and Rabbi Masinta is going to be starting an unbelievable shofar project. And by the way, we just got very good news. Our President Ramaphosa has opened up the country a little more to level 2 and to interprovincial traveling. So hopefully the shuls will be open more and more things can be done. But in this month of Elul, in 1974, the Rebbe, as those who were in New York would remember, that a couple of times a year, this in itself was revolutionary. The Rebbe would farbrengen many, many times during the year, where the shul would be filled with the men and the women would be upstairs. But a couple of times a year, a revolutionary thing happened. And that is the men were thrown out of the shul, and the women and the girls of the closing of Beis Rivka and other times, the Rebbe would speak specifically to the women. In 1974, thanks. Mandy points out that Rosh Chodesh is actually Thursday and Friday, and we begin blowing the shofar on Friday. Thank you for that correction, Mandy. And speaking about that, we should have a refuah shlema to Shimon ben Gitta. So Friday, we start blowing the shofar, actually. Going back to 1974, that year, the Rebbe made a revolutionary remark when he spoke to the women. And he started the campaign of lighting Shabbos candles. Today, it is an accepted thing that all mothers light 2 Shabbos candles, and girls that are single light 1 Shabbos candle. Today, it's a given. But when the Rebbe started that, it was really revolutionary. And the Rebbe said that we're living in a very dark world. Can you imagine? In 1974, it was already a dark world. How much darker has the world become? And he said to lighten up the world, he's encouraging the aspect of lighting Shabbos candles. And he said that every married woman lights 2 candles, and he would suggest that every single girl, out of respect to their mother, should start lighting 1 candle. And only when they get married should they light 2. Interestingly enough, this, if you think about it, is one of the mitzvah campaigns which is different to tefillin, different to family purity, different to mezuzah, because if you think about it, tefillin, mezuzah, family purity is kept by most of, if not all, observant Jews. So the campaign isn't directed necessarily at them, but at that time, for single girls to light a Shabbos candle was almost unheard of. So this campaign wasn't only being directed and non-observant Jews, but observant Jews too. And I don't know if you're aware, but sometimes to try and bring innovations to observant homes isn't easy. And the Rebbe had a lot of complaints from people that it's a sign of disrespect to the married women. And the Rebbe said that he did research on it. And he discovered that this was the custom in many Hasidic Rebbe's homes, in many Hasidic homes, and in Eastern European homes. The custom was for all females to light Shabbos candles. The only thing is that in those days, in Eastern Europe, poverty was the name of the game. People were so poor. And in those days, it wasn't so easy to go just into a shop and get a candle from China or whatever that cost you a few pennies. It was an expense. And sometimes the question was whether to get a candle or food. So when they had such a question, they limited the Shabbos candle lighting only to the married women. But if you look and do research, you will find that before that, it was something that single girls did too. And so the Rebbe initiated the campaign that everyone should light candles. And he also brought that famous Rashi, where Rashi says that Rivka had the same miracles that were done to Sarah. And Sarah had her Shabbos candles lit from Friday to Friday. And we know that Rivka got married from 3. So therefore, the Rebbe pushed that all girls should light Shabbos candles from the age of 3, lighting 1 candle. And the Rebbe also said that the girls should light their candle first so that the mothers can help them if they need any help. And later, that mitzvah became known as Neshek. Neshek stands for the 3 letters Neirot Shabbat Kodesh, and it also, Neshek in Hebrew means ammunition. And this is the way to lighten up the world. Now, I remember at the time, the Rebbe, by the way, got very involved. He had a Mrs. Esther Sternberg as the head of Neshek, and he was very involved with creating the pamphlets, creating the designs for the candlesticks to be given out. There are many, many stories how personally involved he got with it. But I would like to share with you some of the stories. Number one, that the Rebbe told himself, and then a very beautiful story of the Neshek, of the candle lighting. Amongst the stories that I heard from the Rebbe, where he wanted to point out the power and the impact, is that in England, there was a school where they came and spoke to girls about lighting the Shabbos candles. And there was one girl there who came home and took the candle. And they also, the Rebbe was very, very strict in pointing out, I don't know if the word is strict, but he was very careful in pointing out that there's a certain correct time to light Shabbos candles. And you have to be sure to light the candles at that time. In fact, they spent a lot of money in the New York Times and everything, putting every Friday the correct time to light candles. And the shliach who came to that school to speak about the candles spoke about the right time to light the candles. And this girl came home with the candle given to her, the candlestick and the candle, and she told her mother that she has to light it at that time, and the mother gave her permission. But the father used to be at work, and he only came home at 6 o'clock, and in the winter in London, Shabbos comes in at 3:30, 4. So she would light the candles, and he would come home with the candle already lit. After a while, he began becoming embarrassed and he said, how can I come home after the candle is lit? And how can I not make Kiddush? And slowly but surely, this one girl lighting a Shabbos candle in her home ended up making a total difference. That the father began coming home early, the mother began lighting Shabbos candles, the star closed the TV when the Shabbos candles were lit, and they began keeping Shabbos. And in this way, the Rebbe pointed out that his campaign of starting with little girls lighting Shabbos candles changed the whole thing. I recall at that time hearing a story of some parents who didn't want their daughters to light candles. And there was one little girl who had heard about the campaign, and she wanted to light the Shabbos candles. As much as she pleaded, the parents said, "Nyeh, it ain't gonna happen. You are not lighting the Shabbos candles." Was kemeton? She cried. They didn't listen. Helped the Rebbe one Friday night. They wanted to go to a Broadway show or wherever, and they hired a babysitter to look after their daughter. You know, don't try always to play with little girls, because they have a way of getting what it is that they want. So this little girl turns to the babysitter, sees her opportunity, and says, "Do you know, it's a custom that I have to light candles. So I'd like to do it at this and this time." So the babysitter weighs from garnished. "Okay, if that's the custom, fine. Where do we find candles?" "I don't know." So they went to the store to buy the candles. The babysitter comes with this girl, and they go to the shopkeeper and said they want to buy a candle. So the shopkeeper says, "Well, we have all kinds of candles. What candle can I get you?" So the babysitter didn't know, and the girl didn't know. She said, "A Jewish candle." "Oh, a Jewish candle. Okay." Shopkeeper comes back. The only Jewish candle he knew of was a yahrzeit licht. So they give the daughter the yahrzeit licht, and this girl goes home with the babysitter. She lights that yahrzeit candle. She says the blessing over the Shabbos candle as she was supposed to. And from then on, she was a wonderful girl, very easy and compliant. She had her supper and she went to bed, and the babysitter did whatever she did. Parents come home from the show, and nicht gut. They can't believe their eyes. They see a yahrzeit candle. Even though they weren't observant, they knew what a yahrzeit candle meant. So they turned to the babysitter and said, "What's going on here? What is this candle for?" Babysitter says, "I don't know. Your daughter told us that that's what we have to do and light a candle." So they wake up the daughter. They say, "What's going on? What is this candle all about? How did you take such a candle and light it?" And the girl looks at the parents and says, "Mommy, Daddy, if you won't light a candle for me, I will light a candle for you." Those words really entered their heart. And from the next Shabbos on, the Rebbe's campaign of Neshek lit up their home and truly lit up the world. There's a very beautiful story that Chief Rabbi Meir Lau talks about his involvement and his meeting with the Rebbe that had to do with Neshek. And one of the things he says is, as I told you in the past, that there are certain people who call this campaign Kiruv, or the whole idea of bringing Jews back to Judaism, they call it Kiruv Rechokim. Kiruv Rechokim means that we are bringing, Kirov means to bring close, Rechokim, Jews who are far away, who are distant. And the Rebbe said to Rabbi Lau, you cannot label any Jew as being far. Who are we to determine who is far and who is near? We are all close to God. And you know, I often think about those words of the Rebbe before I tell you this story, and they are so deep, because sometimes we think that the people closest to God are those who are so specific in every mitzvah. And the Rebbe says, as Chassidus teaches, Rachmana liba boy, it is sometimes the heart that is the closest. And who are we to determine, said the Rebbe, who is far and who is close? Everybody is close. And then Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, the former chief rabbi of Britain, tells this story that he heard from a Chabad shliach in a remote town in Alaska, speaking to an Eskimo populated school. And there was a shliach by the name of Rabbi Avraham Berkowitz, who used to go for 3 summers to Alaska. This was, by the way, before Rabbi Yossi Greenberg, the permanent shliach in Alaska, who Rabbi Masinta had on a webinar recently, discuss his involvement. And he went out by the Rebbe's request to all the remote corners in Alaska to seek out Jews. On one occasion, they came to a small city in the northwest part of that state, and the mayor told them he knows of no Jews in that city. But he invited them to give a talk to the students at the local school. And they shared with 8th grade students some teachings about Judaism. And then the students performed some Eskimo dances for them, and they performed some Hasidic dances in turn for the Eskimos. Knowing that the Rebbe wanted them to find Jews if they could, that's what they were doing there. This shliach, Rabbi Avram Berkowitz, asked the students, did any of you ever meet a Jew? One girl raises her hand, and Avram says to her, what Jew did you ever meet? And she says, my mother. She's right there. And she pointed to the school's 5th grade teacher. After the class, the mother was very visibly moved and thanked the shliach for coming. And she said that she always loved nature. And years earlier, she came to Alaska and married a native man. I must tell you, she said, that living here in Alaska, I don't know if my daughter will ever meet another rabbi again. Therefore, I ask you, can you please give my daughter a message to ensure that she will always be proud of her Jewish identity? Berkowitz's mind is racing. He knew he only had a few moments. What can he say? Guys, if you thought about it, what message could you give her? And the answer that he came up with is something that we all should think about it. Thinking back to the Rebbe's talks, he realized that one of the Rebbe's greatest strengths was his ability to personalize a mitzvah and to empower the individual. You want to give a message to someone that'll last? Give them an action, something to do, especially mitzvahs, because they are connected to the essence of the Almighty. And he started to speak to the girl about the holiness of Shabbos, the day which Jews dedicate to God. And then he said, Do you know who ushers in the Shabbos? It's our mothers and daughters who light the Shabbos candles, because Shabbos candles symbolizes peace and light into the world. And then he asked her, tell me, do you know where is the first place in the world that the sun sets? The girl knew geography, thank God. And she said, I'd imagine it's probably New Zealand or Australia. And Rebbe Avram said, that's right. So Jewish mothers and daughters in New Zealand and Australia are the first ones to usher in Shabbos. And then Shabbos is ushered in candles in Asia, in Israel, in Europe, in Africa, in New York, Chicago, Seattle, Anchorage. And even then, there's one part of the world where the sun has not yet set, and that is in the Yupik territory of Alaska, right here. When all mothers and daughters around the globe have welcomed in the Shabbos, God and the Jewish people are still waiting for you. The last Jewish girl in the world that'll have the opportunity to light the Shabbos candles for us. And this is, in effect, what happened, how it went around the globe and created with the Rebbe's power of Neshek. But you know, the Rebbe wasn't only involved on a global level. There's a beautiful story that when the Rebbe started Neshek, this whole campaign, they put addresses that you could write for more information about getting the candles. And the address was 770. Most things went to 770, but there were different offices. So this was the office of Shabbos candles. Many people weren't aware of it. And they used to address their letters sometimes by mistake to the Rebbe himself. I want to tell you, my friends, the Rebbe is the most amazing person you can ever meet. Amongst the things that the Rebbe did was he is the only one who opened his letters addressed to him. Many he kept private, and he was the only one who answered them. I don't know of another individual, such a public individual in the world, who doesn't have press secretaries and people working for him. I remember even in the 1970s when I was a yeshiva, on average, a canvas bag of mail would come addressed to the Rebbe. You understand that? And the Rebbe would read each one personally and then decide who he answers and what the answer was, etc. So one of these letters came to the Rebbe on a Friday afternoon. And it said she would like help in lighting Shabbos candles. The Rebbe had his secretary call up Mrs. Sternberg and said, look, this lady wants help in lighting Shabbos candles. We don't wait. We get into action immediately. It's Friday. I'd like her to have the Shabbos candles for this Shabbos. They write that, but the time they got the message, it was 45 minutes left to Lichtbenchen. If the Rebbe said he wanted them to light Shabbos candles that week, they had to get it done. They looked up the lady's phone number. It was unlisted, but the return address was on Ocean Avenue. Anyone who knows the areas of Ocean Parkway, Ocean Avenue and Flatbush, she jumped into the car with her daughter, didn't drive, flew to Ocean Avenue, got to the apartment building and began ringing the bell. There was no answer. They didn't know what to do. They rang another bell. A lady answered, and they said they're trying to get in to speak to this lady. They knocked on her door, and the lady said, she's hard of hearing. Maybe that's why she can't answer. Bang harder on the door. They banged. This lady got her way into it, and it was an elderly lady. And she said, thank you so much for coming. Baruch Hashem, I could light my own candle now. But she looked like a very Yiddish lady with a mezuzah, so Mrs. Sternberg was very surprised. And she said, don't you light Shabbos candles? So the lady said, I used to all my life. But ever since I moved here, my kids moved me. And she shows them, there is high up in a bookcase, her Shabbos licht. And she said, I tried many times to reach them, and I can't. I couldn't get them down. And she thought you had to light the candles in those Shabbos candles. She didn't realize that you could light candles in any candlestick as long as you have a candle to light. And so they actually brought down the candlestick for her, and she lit her Shabbos candles from then on. But you see how the Rebbe wouldn't waste a second. If there was an opportunity to do a mitzvah at that moment, he rushed in to do it and to make sure that it was done. You know, it says about mitzvahs in general that we shouldn't hesitate. We shouldn't allow them to be chametz. But how often are we ready to put things away? And yet here the Rebbe taught his Hasidim that if you have an opportunity to do it immediately. I remember a personal situation. I was working for Rabbi Hecht's father there, Rabbi J.J. Hecht, and we had something called Heritage Weeks. In New York public schools, there was a situation that they wanted to show that all lives matter and all cultures and all societies, that we should teach them about it. So they made Heritage Weeks. So for example, they had Jewish Heritage Week, Black Heritage Week, Latino Heritage Week, all those. Then they had religious heritage weeks. So they had Jewish Heritage Week, Christian Heritage Week, Muslim Heritage Week. Then they had Country Heritage Week. So they had Israel Heritage Week, Mexico, and all those things. I remember at that time we met with a certain Galach, a certain Christian priest for all the different heritages. And he said, you Jews are so lucky, because with me, I will only be there when it's my religious week. But you Jews, whatever type of week we will have, you will be there represented. If we do religions, you're there. If we do cultures, you're there. If we do nations, you're there. And it was fascinating working with these people. One of the principals of those schools wrote to the Rebbe how impressed he was with my presentation, with my this, with whatever it is that we did. And that letter came to the Rebbe. And I remember Rabbi Chadakov calling Rabbi Hecht and myself to say that the Rebbe got a letter from this principal. He wants us to get involved with him and see what we can do. Number one, for him personally in Yiddishkeit, and number two, to get the whole school involved more than in Yiddishkeit. When the Rebbe got any type of correspondence, any type of request, how he would immediately get into gear and get his Hasidim into gear, because he knew all it takes is one more mitzvah to lighten up the world. And this is what I would like to encourage everybody. to take the Rebbe's words to heart. You know, we are coming to the month of Elul. Why do we blow shofar in the month of Elul? What makes Elul so special? Everybody knows that Moshe Rabbeinu was on Mount Sinai for 40 days and 40 nights getting the Torah. On the 40th day when he came down, it was the 17th of Tammuz, he saw the golden calf and he had to destroy the tablets. He then went up again to Mount Sinai, and he then went up a third time. The third time that he went up, he was pleading with God to open the channels for light from heaven and for atonement. He was there for 40 days. On the 40th day, Vayomer Hashem salachti kidvarecha, and God said, I have forgiven you as you requested. And that day he opened the channel for atonement forever. That day is Yom Kippur. So work out. Yom Kippur is the 10th day of Tishrei. So you have the 10 days of Tishrei and a month before it, which is 40 days. So that is the 40 days. Moshe Rabbeinu went up in the month of Elul. On the first of Elul, Rosh Chodesh Elul, he went up and he achieved the channel of coming close to God and lightening up the world with Torah and mitzvahs. And this is what we appeal to everybody. The world is truly a dark place. The Rebbe worked so hard in lightening up not only the world, but the individual, the community, the home, the hearts of each individual. And this is what we have to do, especially as we approach Elul. My friends, let us think how we can brighten up our own lives. Rabbi Popak started with saying that the Rebbe wanted joy. He demanded to serve God with joy. We have so much to be thankful for, so much to be joyous. We can see light at the end of the tunnel. The lockdowns are coming to the end. It's opening up. We'll have again contact with people, shuls. Let us brighten up the world. If there is any girl, woman who as of yet who is listening to this or we know about, who isn't lighting a Shabbos candle, Yom Tov candle yet, let us ensure that they do. You know, a girl's reaching 3. Get her a birthday present. Get her a beautiful leichter to light a candle, to lighten up the world. And let us hope that truly soon we'll see the end of darkness, the end of exile, with the coming of Mashiach to the time, Yom Shekulei Shabbos, that will have the true Shabbos, the true peace, the true light, the true love. Thank you, a good fach.
Rabbis, thank you both so much. I want to say to Rabbi Popek, look, your father does a favor to somebody from Panama. Look how years later it just comes back to repay and the help that the Rav gave you. And to Rabbi Kolabach, come, let's all undertake, whoever's watching, let's find at least one girl or lady who's not lighting Shabbos candles. And I also want to point out that one has to light the Shabbos candles 18 minutes before sunset. To light them after sunset is a desecration of Shabbos. So let's all resolve to find at least one young girl or one lady who's not lighting Shabbos candles or not lighting on time. And please God, by that light that is brought into the world, may it dispel the darkness, and may we have the ultimate light, the coming of Mashiach. I want to pass over to Aaron now. Tomorrow evening we have